Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. We're opening with a story that proves you don't need to yell to get revenge. When HR refused to honor a well-earned promotion, this student calmly walked out midweek, quoting their own rules as he did it. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Your promotion hasn't been approved yet. I went to a for-profit film/photography school and was a student worker, PT, in the equipment checkout, think camera, audio, lighting, etc., rental department. My primary job was repairing damaged equipment, and I was good at it. One of the best managers I ever had knew I was about to drop out of school in my last year because I couldn't afford it anymore, so she offered me a promotion to full-time, which would allow me to take my final 6 classes at no cost, though I'd be working full-time. When she approved my promotion, which included my pay rate doubling, I started working full-time. After a few days, she left for a 3-week cruise, a family vacation she'd been preparing over a year for. With her on PTO, we're now only 2 full-time employees in the department. The rest were part-time student workers, and none of them did repair work. I'd been working full-time for 2 weeks, and she'd been on PTO for 1 when paychecks came out. Mine was half of what I was expecting. They'd not raised my pay rate. I went to HR on my lunch break to dispute/discuss, and HR was next to useless. I'm sorry, but your promotion has not been approved yet. These things take time. It might go through at the end of the month, 2 more weeks. This is not personal, it's just the regulations. I didn't get mad, I didn't yell. I simply told the HR rep that I needed to think about it, so I walked around the rest of my break and thought. Cue malicious compliance. After that, I went back to HR and told them this. For the past 2 weeks, I've been working full-time and repairing equipment at the level of a trained technician. As you have stated, my full-time position is not yet authorized, and as such, I can only work a maximum of 24 hours per week. It's Wednesday afternoon, and I've maxed out my hours for the week. I'll be going home now. I have a dog to walk and a pool to swim in. I was house-sitting for my manager. Did I say that she was awesome? I'm not quitting. I'll be back for my regular shift next Monday, and I'll be working 24-hour weeks at the level of a student worker. I'm sure the pile of broken gear will still be there waiting for me. Please understand, there's nothing personal about this. I'm simply following the employee regulations. At that point, I left the campus and drove to the house, walked the dog, and had a swim. Just before 5 p.m., I got a call. Matt, can you come in tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.? We have some papers for you to fill out to finalize your promotion. Long story short, HR/payroll refused to put through a promotion to full-time that my manager had approved. I refused to work full-time until my promotion was approved. My manager loved hearing it from HR when she got back. Edit. Seems like a common question. Did I get the back pay? Sadly, the answer is no, because the official promotion paperwork, contracts, employee handbook, etc. had not been finalized and approved. But I did end up staying there for around 10 more years. Imagine being that manager, sipping pina coladas on a cruise, totally unaware HR's plotting nonsense. Then she gets back and AR has to confess, so, remember that promotion you approved? We didn't process it, and then he shut down the entire department by following our own rules. That must have been the funniest thing of her career. And our second story. The old man who decides nothing. I'm writing this as the owner of a mid-sized manufacturing company in the States. I'm not going to name the company or the city. The family business is still running, and I don't want extra noise. All you need for context is this. We make industrial components for city services and construction contractors. Nothing glamorous, metal, noise, hot furnaces, delivery schedules, contracts with insurance companies and the city. A typical plant where people show up at 6 a.m. and often know each other better than their own neighbors. My father, let's call him Roy, founded this business when I was still a kid. He always repeated, a company isn't the machines, a company is the people who run them. When he officially stepped back from management, he didn't retire in the classic sense. He just stopped signing papers and sitting in meetings, but he kept coming to the shop floor for the soul of it. Roy kept doing what he did better than anyone, walking the line, saying hello, asking people about their kids, about that knee after surgery, about how the new batch was going. He knew everyone by name, not because some management book said to, but because he once stood right there with them by those presses. We had an unspoken rule. If Roy was on the floor, he was part of the team. not the former owner, not the boss's dad, just Roy. The guys always seemed to relax when he was around. They worked better when they felt respected. And that's where our new COO entered the stage. Let's call him Brad. Brad joined us about a year ago. His resume looked great. Cost optimization, production transformation, margin improvement, downtime reduction. I was looking for someone to bring order to our processes. We were going fast, and I honestly didn't have enough hands or nerves to keep operations in a fist by myself. In the interview, Brad was charming. He said all the right things: safety, people, quality. He showed spreadsheets, smiled confidently, and I, idiot that I was, thought, finally, someone who'll take this KPI swamp off my shoulders and I can focus on strategy and clients. For the first 2 months, he really did work fine. Inventory checks, cleaning up the warehouses, schedules, but little horns started showing. He didn't like anyone arguing with him. He couldn't stand it when shift supervisors offered solutions from the floor. He kept repeating, "I'm here to reform things. If you're comfortable with old habits, that's not my problem." People told me quietly, without panic, "Our crew is patient. New manager, tough guy, we'll ride it out." Back then, I still didn't see that this wasn't toughness, it was plain arrogance. The real explosion happened on a Tuesday. I was in the office, buried in contracts with a big customer. The sounds from the shop floor reached us muffled, like a heartbeat through a wall. Around 11, my quality manager, let's call him Sam, called me. "Hey, can you come out for a minute? There's a weird situation." His tone wasn't, "We've got defects." It was straight up worried. I stepped into the hallway, and even before I reached the doors, I heard yelling. Real yelling that cut through the production noise. I ran to the floor. Brad was standing in the middle of the aisle, facing the line, waving a folder like he was about to whip someone with it. In front of him was my father. Roy was in his old jacket with reflective stripes, wearing work gloves, gray-haired, calm. He had a small notebook in his hand, the same one he always carried. Brad was screaming at him. Not like a private office argument, like he wanted everyone to hear. "Listen, mister," he looked at the badge on my dad's chest like he was seeing it for the first time. "Roy, you don't run anything here. You're just walking around and getting in people's way." "I was asking Josh if he needed help with the new press," my father said quietly. "No," Brad snapped the word like a gunshot. "Don't step into the processes. You're behind the times. There are different standards now. I'm responsible for operations. You're nobody." He actually said, "You're nobody" here in front of everyone. In that moment, it got very quiet. Even the conveyor seemed to squeak less loudly. The guys on the line froze. The shift lead, Martin, took a step forward, but Sam grabbed his elbow, because when two grown men are about to jump in, it always ends badly. My father didn't answer. He just slowly took off his gloves, folded them the way you fold a flag, neatly, without rush. Then he nodded to Josh, nodded to Martin, and looked at me. There was no anger in his eyes, just tiredness. And something else. Something that made my throat tighten. He turned wordlessly and walked toward the exit. Brad threw after him, "Go do your retirement stuff already. Seriously." I stood there like I'd been nailed to the floor. Honestly, one thought kept spinning in my head. Did that really just happen? Roy didn't turn back, he just left. Brad, as if nothing had happened, turned to the supervisors. "All right, back to work. All questions go through me." And he walked to his office, whistling to himself. I felt something dark boiling inside me, but, and this matters, I didn't explode right away because I needed to understand what was happening and why people were looking at me like I'd let them down. I gathered the supervisors and asked one simple thing. What happened before I ran in? They said my dad came up to the line and, out of habit, checked a new assembly we'd installed a week earlier. He told the guys not to torque one bolt dry because years ago a whole run cracked on a big order because of that, and that was it. Meaning he wasn't giving orders, wasn't messing with layouts, wasn't undermining Brad. He was just talking to people. And Brad blew up. I went to Brad's office. He was sitting at his desk with his computer and charts like nothing had happened. "Brad, what the hell was that?" I tried to keep my voice level. He didn't even look up. "I'm putting things in order. We have a chain of command. People can't scatter to old authorities. It hurts discipline." That's my father. The founder of this company. Only then he looked at me directly and said, almost offended, "Even more reason. If he walks around here, everyone will look at him instead of me. I want people to take me seriously." I nearly laughed at the absurdity, but I didn't. "You humiliated him in front of everyone," I said. "If you don't set boundaries, we'll never grow," he shot back. "This is business, not a family club." I walked out before finishing the conversation because I knew if I stayed another minute, I'd snap and it would get ugly. That evening, I drove to my father's house. He lived not far from the plant, in a small place we bought back when the first real profits came in. When I walked in, he was sitting in his old study, shelves of folders, yellowed plans, boxes of documents. The same smell: wood, dust, ink, time. He looked at me and said, "Sit down." In his hands was a thick, dark blue binder tied with an old ribbon, the kind you can't even buy now. "I didn't want to get involved," he started, "but he's been signing things he doesn't understand." I didn't get it. "What things?" He opened the binder and laid 2 original contracts and a few letters in front of me. "Remember our city contract for service equipment?" I nodded. It was one of our biggest stable contracts, repair and supply of components for municipal services. "There's an insurance condition in it," he said. "If technological processes or subcontractors change, we're required to notify the city and the insurer in writing. Otherwise, the insurance is void." He pointed to the clause, the fine print everyone usually ignores because the lawyers will handle it. "Brad doesn't know that," Roy said, turning the page. "Here's his order. He moved part of the process to outside outsourcing without notifying the insurer. And he also signed a new chemical regulation that violates our environmental license." I stared at the papers and felt cold creep up my spine. "Has he already put that regulation into effect?" I asked. "This morning," my father said quietly. "If a city audit walks in tomorrow, they can shut us down." Not because we're bad, because he's reforming with a brain that's never stood in our shop. I sat there in silence, ashamed on 2 levels at once, that I'd allowed this as an owner and that I hadn't stopped Brad sooner. Roy put a hand on my shoulder. "I'm not offended. I'm old. I've seen all kinds. But I don't want you to lose this company because of someone's ego." That hit harder than any of Brad's yelling. The next morning, I launched an internal audit. Not a checkbox audit. I brought in an outside firm that specializes in compliance and city contracts. Martin, Sam, and our chief lawyer, let's call her Lisa, went into it like it was a fight. At first, Brad acted like it was a standard review. Then he got nervous. Then he started pushing. "You're undermining discipline. You're slowing reforms. This is sabotage." When he realized nobody was playing on his field, he disappeared into his office and stopped answering emails. The audit lasted a week, and what they found was worse than I expected. Brad hadn't just made one mistake. He'd been methodically messing with contracts and changing processes without telling legal. He signed updated instructions without aligning with environmental regulations. He cut the maintenance program that was directly tied to our insurance obligations. And he tried to rewrite access rights to a warehouse land parcel we'd gotten under old terms, special usage rights, and nearly wrecked them with a single signature. When Lisa put the final report on my desk, all I could do was exhale. Jesus. She looked at me, tired. "This isn't God, this is your operations." On Friday, I called a board meeting. We're a small board, me, 2 outside advisors, the chief lawyer, the CFO, and, yes, my father. Not as a relative, but as a man who still has an advisory role in the company's documentary memory. Brad walked in confident. So confident it looked like he'd called the meeting, not me. "Well," he smiled, sitting down, "I'm guessing we're going to talk about how emotionally you're reacting to change." I looked at him and said calmly, "We're going to talk about how you put this company at risk of being shut down." He opened his mouth to crack a joke, but I raised a hand. "Let's go step by step." Lisa went through the points, each one linked to a contract clause, a regulation, an email trail. We didn't raise our voices, we just read facts. Brad laughed at first, then interrupted, then started nervously clicking his pen. When we got to the insurance and city contract, he exploded. "These are little things, everyone does it. And anyway, you're not letting me work." And then my father, who'd been silent the whole time, pulled out that same blue binder. He laid the original contracts on the table. His movements were so calm they looked like he was setting down a cup of coffee. "I was signing these contracts when you were still doing spelling tests in school," Roy said quietly. "You don't know what little things mean in a city audit." Brad looked at the documents, then at my father. His face changed. For the first time, he didn't look like a presentation hero. He looked like a kid who forgot his homework. I didn't know," he muttered. Roy nodded. "That's why you had no right to sign." I turned to the board. "This conclusion is simple. Brad created legal and financial risks, violated compliance, and built a toxic culture on the floor." Then I looked at him. "Your employment is terminated effective today. HR's already preparing the package." And please return your system access by end of day. He wanted to say something, but didn't. He just stood up and walked to the door. And when the door closed, something happened I didn't expect. Applause came from the hallway. Not polite, not for show, real loud applause. I stepped out and saw people from the shop floor, Martin, Josh, Sam, a few other leads. They were standing there clapping. Not for me, for Roy. My father looked embarrassed. He lifted his hands like, enough, and said, knock it off, get back to work. Someone laughed. Someone nodded with relief. That was the moment I understood my company was still alive, because its heart isn't in the office. The heart's out there on the floor, in the people who remember who respected them before the trendy reform showed up. Later that day, I went into my father's little office at the plant. He was gathering his gloves, the same ones he took off on Tuesday. Dad, I'm sorry, I said. He looked at me calmly. For what? For letting this happen at all. He smiled just a little. Listen, you grew the company to the point where Brads come here. That's normal. The important thing is they don't stay long. I laughed, even though my eyes were wet. Then he added more seriously, remember one thing. You don't have to know every spreadsheet, but you can't not know the people. And you can't humiliate the ones who built this house when it didn't even have a roof yet. That's the whole lesson. No fancy words. Brad thought power meant yelling louder. Turns out power is quietly pulling out a binder, putting facts on the table, and saving a family and the people who became your family. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.